Hello, and welcome back to Resilience Unravelled. And welcome to my guest, Kevin McCarthy. Where in the world are you?
I'm in the metropolitan Phoenix, Arizona area.
Well, it's lovely to meet you. And what are we going to be talking about today?
Blind spots.
Blind spots. Fantastic. What a great idea. Well, look, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I have been an entrepreneur, leader in a number of businesses, had sold several businesses, and had some very interesting learning experiences in some other businesses, as most entrepreneurs have. The real pivot point for me, Dr. Russell, was after selling a business in the late 90s during that dot-com stock bubble craziness. Became a paper millionaire for a brief moment. That was
Yeah,
fun,
yeah,
but it was all leveraged on stock portfolios and lost everything. So it was tragic.
yeah.
The next opportunity, though, took me down a path of becoming a consultant for a company that was getting ready to go public. Since I had just experienced that, I thought this is a great opportunity, but I wasn't paying attention about my blind spots. Turns out that I ended up not just consulting for that company for 30 days, but I ended up consulting for that company for 15 months and never saw prison coming
Oh, for you?
for me and for 11 other men in that company. I spent 33 months in a federal prison for a crime I didn't knowingly commit.
Oh, tell us more.
And the key word there is knowingly. I
Mm,
did I did what I did. I was guilty. I owned up to it. I accepted it. I accepted a plea bargain. But in hindsight, it was easier to see the red flags than it was in the context of the moment.
yeah.
And so looking back, I realized, wow, I was rationalizing, I was justifying, I was blinded by some greed, a lot of different factors that were involved. But going through it, which is what began my journey into cognitive psychology, is realizing that when you're in the middle of whatever it is you're experiencing, you don't necessarily see all of the pertinent
Mm,
information, right? We all look at the world very differently, and we all see the world through the lens that we've created through our own life, our upbringing, our experiences, our trauma, our successes, you name it. And so when I got to prison, I had to ask that question. And first of all, by the way, just for everybody's curiosity, I spent 33 months in a federal minimal security prison, which
ah,
is oftentimes referred to in the U.S. as a federal camp. Uh,
okay.
there's no locks on the doors, no bars on the windows, no cells. It's all community style living, like dormitory living, and there's no fence even around three-quarters of the property. So
Wow.
you're there on an honor system, and don't let that sound awesome because it's still prison, but
Yeah.
it's at least it's not prison stereotypically like you would see on TV.
Yes.
Anything that
You're not in Jens.
yeah, exactly. So when I got there, I had to ask myself, it's like I feel like I'm a little bit smarter than the average bear. And it's like, how could I not have known my boss was committing a crime? And that began again my journey into understanding how we think and how our thoughts impact our behaviors.
Mm,
And certainly a story of resilience, but it's also a story of just really for the first time in my life, stepping back long enough to evaluate who I am
mm,
and how I think, and then what are my behaviors that are the outcomes of that.
yes. So what was it, a financial crime that was taking place? Or
It was, yeah. My boss, according to the FBI office in Seattle, Washington, my boss said he was the most cunning con man in the history of the state of Washington,
wow.
and he was doing what's called a stock fraud. It's not a
Right.
Ponzi scheme. It's literally he was just selling people a dream, giving them stock certificates, saying that he was going to take the company public. And the company had been around for 6 years when I became a consultant. And then it was that last 15 months where he was already under investigation, didn't even know that. So he was selling stock and collecting people's money. He sold and took $93 million from over 5,000 investors over that
Wow.
7 year period. And yeah, and so and they never recovered 20 million of it. And
Wow.
so there's a mystery as to where that 20 million
I
ended
think
up.
I think we can guess.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, the
he
fact that
ended
you're
up
here
just,
today means that's probably not you.
yeah, right. The fact that I've had to scrape to get back up on my feet after prison, which that'll knock you down pretty hard.
Hmm.
Um, and again, to bring a little bit more closure to that part of the story for the listeners, he took a plea bargain that was 20 years, and he
Wow.
served roughly 16 and a half years of that sentence. And so the standing joke, I guess I could use that word for a second, but the standing joke among several of us who were sort of the victims as well as, again, guilty, is that he earned about $1 million a year on that sentence.
Yes.
That
And
there's
he's not had to spend
no,
it, so that's handy.
yeah, of
Free
course,
food
he'll
and
be
bud.
watched by the FBI for probably the rest of his life, waiting for that money
Yes.
to show up.
Yes, they're going to look out for that, aren't they? Mind
Oh,
you,
for sure.
the way the FBI is now, probably not. Probably he'd be going to the top of the pops. Who knows?
Right, right.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating. So you keep mentioning blind spots, and so you better tell us, other than the obvious, what a blind spot is.
Blind spots are these unconscious biases, these limiting beliefs and thinking errors that cloud perceptions and drive destructive behaviors. And so I think of it as a more overarching term than just say unconscious bias, for example. We all have unconscious biases, but in addition to the unconscious biases, many of us have thinking errors from time to time.
Yeah.
And we also then, many of us deal with limiting beliefs. So,
Yeah.
for example, the imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
So blind spots to me encompasses all of that. Basically, it's what makes us think, what makes us tick, and how do we think, and then how do those thoughts turn into feelings and behaviors?
So you've bandied about a few phrases there. So let's just pick a few of those, if we may, just so because people assume they know what they mean, but let's have a chat. So what do you mean by unconscious bias? Let's cover that first, shall we?
Yeah, there's unconscious bias. So again, depending on upbringing, the way we view the world, we have these beliefs, if you will, that they're unconscious by nature. In other words, we're not consciously thinking. Here's a sad but great example. My grandfather on my dad's side was a very racist, bigoted man, not a great human being. My father was a phenomenal human being, but early on in his youth, and as he had a family and I was a young person, he would, tell some jokes that were very off color, and it was just because it was natural to him. He never even thought about it. He would just tell a joke that maybe he heard from his father. It wasn't until his young, youth in his career where one of his managers said, "Jim, you're great at what you do. So, but you need some refinement in who you are and how you interact with human beings." They actually sent him to a week-long training program in New York City back in that day. And what came out of that is he realized and began to recognize his unconscious bias, meaning that he's not a racist human being, but he had these unconscious beliefs that were in brought into him through this upbringing. And so now he can become conscious of them, and now he can wrestle with them and deal with them and make better choices.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense. And you talked about thinking errors. Again, what do you mean by that?
Thinking errors. So, great example. I was in prison, this federal camp. Now, a little bit more background on the camp: two dormitories, 500 inmates. So I had 499 roommates.
Cozy.
And yes, very interesting. But each of those two dorms had a pool table. I love to
Oh.
play pool. And in fact, I am a senior referee for the world's largest pool tournaments in Las Vegas, Nevada, in the USA.
Mm.
And one day I was sitting in a classroom at the prison. I was fortunate enough to be able to take a cognitive behavioral psychology course. And the instructor left the room and said, "I've got to deal with this radio call." And he goes, "You guys take 15-minute break or whatever." I decided to go to the pool table room, and I'm playing pool and I'm not even paying attention to the time. And then suddenly the instructor shows up in the pool room. He had been looking for his missing student. And I just made some unconscious decisions just to and dive into the pool. Well, their thinking error there was I didn't pay attention to what my responsibility was. I just fell or succumbed to what I enjoyed. So that's a simple thinking error, not an unconscious bias.
Yeah, interesting. Makes sense. So, when you're talking about, because you mentioned narcissism earlier, and often when we're talking about narcissism, it's it's that sense of utter self-absorption. But it's interesting because people throw those terms around, and it's very hard to sort of differentiate between a narcissist and someone who's just got very high self-esteem, self-regard, strong sense of self. So, how are you again differentiating that?
I'm not sure that I said the word narcissism, but I probably inferred it because the criminal that was leading that
Yeah.
crime in Seattle was certainly a narcissist,
Okay.
based on the popular version of the term.
I
And
see.
so I'm not an expert in narcissism, but here's what I've understood, Dr. Russell, is a clinical narcissist is just incapable of having human emotion and empathy, and so it's all about them.
Mm,
But we see somebody who's arrogant, and we call them a narcissist. We see somebody
mm.
who's rude and brash, and there's a certain U.S. person I'm thinking of that's very popular, but
Can't imagine who you mean.
we like to call somebody a narcissist, right? They may not be a narcissist. In fact, if narcissism is arrogance, then there's a lot more narcissists in this society than we think.
Mm.
So it's a fine line. I'm not an expert in that area, but we do get terms taken out of context and applied to, incorrectly to people that they shouldn't be applied to.
So obviously, I would assume that most of us have blind spots because very few of us know ourselves that well. So how do you, I mean, there's obviously feedback from other people, but how else can you figure out your blind spots?
Well, first of all, you're absolutely correct. We actually all have blind spots. And the nature of blind spots is because we don't see what they are. And usually it
Mm,
does take other people that see it. When we think in terms of leadership, for example, when we step into the role of a leader, we bring who we are to the table. And we think we're doing a great job. We think we're leading the charge and getting the mission accomplished. But the others around us might be seeing us as a jerk or
mm,
a bully or insensitive to my needs. You name it. The list goes on. This disconnect, I call it the perception gap. And so, when you think in terms of, again, leadership, the important thing is, first of all, you have to slow down long enough to be more self-reflective. That's what I mentioned earlier. It's like
yeah.
I was in a crazy fast pace of life. My ambition was to become rich by the time I was 30. I missed that mark. Took a few more years than that. And yet I was running fast and furious. So I never really stopped long enough to look in the proverbial mirror and go,
Mm,
who am I?
mm,
And is what I see and what I believe absolutely true? And so that's the first thing as a leader, step back and
mm,
be more introspective, if you will. And I don't mean you go down this dark path that's going to put you into a spiral. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about understand what makes you tick. There's a lot
mm,
of assessment tools out there to get you started. The second part of that equation is you have to learn to be aware. What I like to say is aware in the moment. Now, we all think we're self-aware. The studies show that 90 to 95% of us believe we're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% of us actually are. In
mm,
other words, we all have room to grow. We all have
mm,
room to work on ourselves. And again, now talk back to that incorrect use of narcissism, right? That you think the arrogant person doesn't have any room to work on themselves, at least in their mind, they've
mm.
got it all together. Usually arrogance is a cover up for insecurity.
Yeah.
So we all have room to work on ourselves. So don't
Mm,
compare who you are to who somebody else is. Just look in that proverbial mirror. And by the way, Dr. Russell, the proverbial mirror I'm talking about is not a reflection, it's a refraction. So you look into that mirror and you think you're seeing who you are, but it's like going into the carnival with the house of mirrors. In reality, it's not giving you feedback that's completely correct.
no.
Therefore, you have to go to others and you have to get feedback from other people on how are you perceiving me versus how
Yes.
I'm perceiving me.
Yes, and that's quite an interesting challenge, isn't it? Because the key there is to go to people whose opinion you respect as well, because there's a lot of trouble with 360-degree feedback tools, aren't there, where you're just asking everybody what to think of you, and that can be a poisoned chalice, can't it? So sometimes fewer items and more robustness in the program is really important, isn't it? Do you also have an assessment tool as well? Because often that sort of triangle of self-assessment is feedback and also some sort of diagnostic. So I'm guessing you're going to talk about some sort of diagnostic.
I don't at this time have a 360 assessment. I do have a what I call the blind spot assessment.
Okay.
And the blind spot assessment is it's based on the structure or the framework of DISC. And a lot of people have taken DISC or
Yeah,
understand DISC. It's one of the oldest instruments out there, most tried and true. So we've decided to
well,
create
it's
it on the
free.
framework, right? So yeah, so that it's a validated tool, but it's bent, if you will. It's direction that we took with it is let's not just talk about a myriad of lines of personality temperaments. Let's talk about what those temperaments look like from a blind spot perspective.
Mm,
So it shows you your strengths, but what we don't realize is most, if not all, of our strengths can be perceived and can cause blind spots. They can be perceived by others as not necessarily a strength, but a blind
yes.
spot.
Yeah. Yes, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because by its very nature, anything you're doing and putting into the world, you're either doing it you're always doing it consciously or unconsciously, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's useful, does it? That's the trouble here. It's whether it works is the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not even quite that black and white, in my opinion, of whether it's useful or not useful. You'd have to narrow that down to is it useful right now in this situation with these circumstances, right? For example, in my blind spot assessment, we have 8 temperaments. The 4 primaries are the competitor, motivator, peacemaker, analyzer.
Yeah.
Those correlate with the disc, and then there's the blended styles. Well, as a competitor personality temperament, which also sometimes is referred to as that type A driver,
Yeah.
that competitive personality temperament is all about results. Let's get it done, right?
Mm,
Let's sometimes at whatever cost. But I've got a mission to accomplish. I'm going to get that mission accomplished, and give me the bullet points and punchlines. I'll fill in the blanks, and because I've got no time. I'm on the move,
yeah.
right? That personality is fantastic. Gets a lot of tasks completed.
Yeah.
But you take the opposite personality temperament, which is a peacemaker. And this is that steady, even keel, person who's loyal, who's a little
Mm,
bit slower paced, thorough, doesn't show their feelings on their sleeves. So you get a competitor coming into a peacemaker's office with all of that great strength of the competitiveness, that competitor
mm,
strength, and the peacemaker gets flustered, feels bullied at times, doesn't feel heard, seen, valued, and yet there's no ill intentions from the competitors. Their
mm.
intentions are all good, but they're not
It's
being
just a style, isn't it?
it's just a style, but they're not paying attention to the other person's style. And they're not adapting, and therefore they're not paying attention in the moment, right? So
Yeah.
now as a competitor to remedy that, I need to understand, first of all, I need to understand the different temperaments, which is the blind spot assessment was designed to make it easier to remember, so it's
Mm,
simplified, because I'm not into all the academics, and I'm a simple guy with a simple mind who just trying to help people really understand what's going on, right?
sure.
And so if a competitor understands, they can actually go in and speak with the peacemaker in the peacemaker's language. And the peacemaker will feel valued, seen, heard, and feel good about the communication. And the communication will be received well. And it's
Mm,
going to be tough for the competitor to do that initially, because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel natural.
yes.
I have to slow down my pace. I have to be more empathetic. I have to pull you into the conversation at your
Mm,
pace, as opposed to just barking orders and moving on to get things done.
yes. Although that can be effective too, from time to time.
There is a time and a place for
Yeah.
sure.
And that's the point, isn't it? It's situational, isn't it? And I think
That's
people
right.
forget the situational nature of this. Interesting. And I know you've written a book because You've written a book called Blind Spots, haven't you?
Yeah, I've written a couple actually. Blind Spots: Why Good People Make Bad Choices. The first book that I published, and it became an Amazon bestseller in August of 2017. And that's basically my prison story, with woven with the lessons, or with the lessons woven through it, basically.
Yes.
So it's a fascinating read with intentional cliffhangers from chapter to chapter, and lessons you can take away and put into action right away.
Brilliant. Just going back to, I mean, you mentioned the prison thing, and you were very what's the word about it? You weren't making a big deal of it. I can't think of the opposite of that. But you still have to get through it, don't you? And you still have to
Mhm.
cope with the ups and downs, and you still have to cope with the fact that you are away and locked, or even if not locked very well, you're still away. Lots of people cope well with prison. Lots of people take really well to prison. Lots of people thoroughly enjoy prison, get massively institutionalized, and then as soon as they come out, they offend again, so they can go back in again.
That's
So
true.
how do you manage that? Staying yourself, and then when you come out, moving on again? Is it about building purpose? What was your strategy to get you through the experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. Going through the experience, my strategy was to not get involved in the routines.
Mm,
I like to think of it in this term. If I can describe this prison, imagine an administrative building where you walk through the door into this huge courtyard, kind of like a community college campus setting. To the left, there are two dormitories, 2 stories, big white buildings, and a wide, long sidewalk to get you to those buildings. To
mm,
the right, as you're looking into the courtyard, is another long building, and at the end of the building, there's a exercise equipment, exercise room. There's a chapel. There's a GED center if you need to get your diploma. There's a computer lab if you want to learn how to do computing. There's other kinds of educational areas. There's a library. There's even a law library where lawyers that are in prison get to practice law internally in prison, which is interesting. So the point here is that when you open that door and you stare at the two options, I have one option of going down this wide sidewalk toward the dorms, or I have this other option of going down this more narrow sidewalk that leads to all of the self-improvement. Most of the men that I experienced in the 33 months took that wide sidewalk to the dorms, figuratively speaking, meaning when you're in the dorms, you can pretty much be whoever you were on the outside inside, because there's no bars. Like I said, there's no locks. There's the only rule that we had was you can't be outside the dorm after 9 p.m. and you have to stay in the dorm until at least 5 a.m. when they ring the bell. So during the that time period, you can stay up all night if you want. You can play
mm.
cards, and they always had an inmate posted to watch for guards because they like to gamble with the poker. And you could sit and watch TV all night long. You could lay in your bed with a reading lamp and read fiction books if you want to all night long. You can
Mm.
just hang out in the lobby and just goof off and party. You can make Pruno, just take fruit and turn it into alcohol. And so in fact, because it's minimal security, it was really easy for guys to get drugs and pornography and alcohol smuggled into the compound. And so
Yeah, I bet.
they were always getting busted, but they got in there for a minute.
Yeah.
But my point is that wide path, even though now you're locked up, so to speak, that wide path led to being the same as you were outside, inside. The
Yes.
narrow path, which was less traveled, led you to looking at yourself, becoming a better you, and leaving the prison. So back to your original question, I made a choice early on when I got there that I'm not going to just hang out for 33 months. I'm going to
Mm.
find out what the heck I was thinking. How could I not have known my boss was a criminal?
Yeah.
And that led to a transformation that was the beginning of my transformative journey, which continues on today.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that's almost like a form of revenge is the wrong word, but it is that strong sense of purpose, isn't it? That how did I not see that? And that isn't interesting. And you've obviously said the magic word choice there, because it is all about choice, isn't it? And the choice
Yeah, it
could have
is.
been I can get bent out of shape for 33 months and really have a miserable time. But I suppose as soon as you turn your attention to something else, that gives you something to focus on. And
Yeah.
that's the strategic point of resilience, isn't it? Is having a strong sense of purpose.
Hmm. Yeah, and you have to find it. It's not
Yeah,
always just knocking at your door saying, here I am on purpose."
yeah. But purpose is a choice as well. So,
Hmm.
you can do something from that. Interesting, fascinating. I can chat to you all day, but I want people to direct people to be able to find you. So where are you? Where you? I'm assuming are online somewhere. So tell us website, social media type stuff.
Yeah, you can find me at blindspots.com. Blindspots.com. That's the primary website. From there, you can find my assessment site. If you want to find me and connect on LinkedIn, you can find me at Kevin McCarthy, CSP, on LinkedIn.
Cool.
CSP is Certified Speaking Professional. I'm also in the top 12% of professional speakers worldwide as a peer designation in the National Speaker Association. So
Very
Kevin
good.
McCarthy, CSP on LinkedIn or blindspots.com.
And of course, you can go to Amazon to get hold of the books, which I think is quite an interesting way of starting in a way, isn't it? Because for those that like to read, or have you got an audio book there as well?
I have not got an audiobook.
With that amazing voice, you must have an audio
I
book.
know, but it's a big project, and the book is not the breadwinner, if you will. So
Good. Well, look, it's been a joy to talk, Kevin. Really useful. Lots of thoughts and interesting conversations there. And for anybody interested, you can just remind us of that website one more time, just so people have got it in their heads.
yes, blindspots.com.
Not hard to remember. Thanks so much, Kevin. It's been a real joy talking to you today.
You as well, Dr. Russell. Thanks for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure.
You take care.